Okay, once again, my name is Graham Lawler, and I'm the founder of Ultralight Startups. And welcome to all of you to our February event in 2010 on designing social websites. So this is a topic that is of particular interest to me, as are many topics here at Ultralight Startups. In that I have now two websites, both of which have a social component of them. One is Ultralight Startups itself, which is not an interactive site and should be. And so I'm interested in hearing some ideas about how to make that more interactive and more social, because people come here month after month and get very excited about the people that they're meeting in person at this event, and then all of a sudden nothing happens for a month, and maybe they come back again next month. And what I want to do is I want to have some online functionality for people to connect in some way socially as members of Ultralight Startups. So I'm interested in that aspect. And then for Brightmap, the startup that I pitched a few minutes ago, which is itself a social network, I'm interested in making the app sticky and making features that people will draw people back again and to the site and to interact with it and to sign up for it and so on. So I think is probably a similar set of concerns that many of you have for your sites and how to make them more social. What I think of as social is just that users of the site are interacting with each other rather than just interacting with the site. I think we'll maybe hear some definitions of what is a social website. So I'm really thrilled to have such a great panel and some people that have built many social sites and many of the most prominent ones out there that are going to be talking about that tonight. And our moderator, Corey Moss, has been an Ultralight member for a great deal of time and has indeed been influential in building Brightmap, as well as many other social sites. And I think he's ideally placed to moderate this panel. So I'm going to introduce him. So Corey is the founder of Gelform, which is a web application design development company focused on user experience, prototyping, usability testing, and front-end development. Gelform products include Dubfiler, a file distribution system for DJs. Corey has designed and run interactive online communities with up to 6,000 members. Previous to Gelform, Corey was a lead front-end developer at institutions such as ARC90, Weill Cornell Medical College, and Penn State. And as was mentioned earlier, he's worked with a large number of Ultralight companies and websites to do design and development for them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Corey, who's going to introduce the panel. Thanks very much, Corey.
So we got a great panel lined up for you tonight. I'll introduce each panelist, starting with Christopher Ian. Christopher Ian Reichel is Director of Product Development and Social Media for Viacom MTV Networks, where his work spans over 70 major network-related websites. His goal for the past decade has been to develop elegant solutions for complex problems. His previous roles have included time as Director of User Experience for Scholastic Books and for Blockbuster. Christopher Ian's past work has included major initiatives for LG Electronics, J.Crew, Credit Suisse, and IBM. Some real big players. Next we have Dan Macarone. Dan created Hard Candy Shell with Kevin Kearney after the two completed the strategy and design work on Hulu, a little website you might have heard of. At HCS, Dan has worked with clients such as the Wall Street Journal, Saturday Night Live, Foursquare, Gilt Group, Gawker, and CBS Radio. He spent over 12 years developing online business strategies and user-centered design solutions for companies such as NBC, Fox, Universal, Scholastic, and Chivas Regal. I don't know if you can do an accent with that. I don't know. Is that too shishi? He also served as the senior producer for the Digital Club Network, the web's first virtual concert venue. Welcome, Dan. Next we have Alex Reinert. Alex is creative director at KGB Web, a startup developing better ways to discover and consume online content. Alex has been working in the interactive industry for 12 years. Prior to KGB Web, he managed the UX and creative teams at Schematic New York, and co-founded Dodgeball.com, later acquired by Google. Alex's agency clients have included Verizon Wireless, Nokia, HBO, IBM, CBS, Core Performance, Fresh Direct, and Thomson Reuters. His blog his blog's about innovation and design at Everyday UX and consults on mobile, social, and emerging technologies at Tinker Studio. And finally, we have Brian Hamilton. Brian is Director of User Experience at Razorfish. He has been complaining about the web for over 12 years, and during that time used that energy to push better experiences on unsuspecting clients like Johnson & Johnson, Condé Nast, HBO, and Billboard magazine. He has used social strategies to enhance the bottom line for advertising-based sites, increase the value of subscription sites, and spread knowledge farther on intranet projects. So welcome. Welcome to our panelists. Sorry, I get my notes here sorted here. Basically, as a way to get started and introduce yourselves, we're going to have each of you talk about how you can make Ultralight Startup's website perfect. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, we want to have each of you, I'll bring up some of the slides here. There are lots of different social design patterns. We wanted to start by going down the row, have each of you pick a pattern that you've championed, tell us about what it accomplished, how you approached it, and if it succeeded. Christopher Ian?
One of the things that many times the business owners, marketing people, what have you, will often decide that they want to play 20 questions. They want to gather as much information about their audience as they can, but unfortunately this often acts as a huge roadblock to people actually coming in. So of this sort of list we were able to look at, I would say this whole engagement, registration, and sign up is very key. It's kind of like the idea, if you require registration before, say, somebody could look at a catalog to go shopping, you already know that that's a bad idea. For social interaction, it's a lot of the same thing. Also, I've worked with large clients where they would get addicted to buzzwords, and they would be like, oh, we have to have social media. And one of the problems there is you always have to ask the question, what is your reason for wanting to be involved in social media? If you sell lawnmower parts, do you really want everybody to have a profile? Do you want them to have blogs? Do you want them to list their favorite bands? Skip it. Let's remember what our focus is, our business is. If you do want people to have a community and share, great. And so I think this whole engagement and registration sign up, one of the things that I really love over the past year or two is just this idea of things like Facebook Connect, Twitter Connect, where I'm already registered somewhere, I already have a profile, and now I can just go to a new community and say something. I don't know if anybody here worked on Juiced, but first time I stumbled into it doing research, I love, was one of the first places I saw Facebook Connect. One click, I was in, looked for my friends. I think that's a very good thing, and I'm definitely a strong advocate of this sharing of information.
Great. Well, I worked on Juiced, so that's awesome. I was going to tell it as one of my horror stories, though. So, we'll talk about that later. I think you're right. I mean, I tend to agree that when you're going to a site and you're whatever the purpose of the site is, lawnmower parts or reading a news article, getting someone to register and do something on that is rather difficult, and getting someone to actually want to engage with other people that especially they don't know is really difficult. I think, as someone who's working with Foursquare and I'm a big champion of their brand, I think they definitely got the right idea with, let's start it with people you already know. Facebook has become a place where you have 500 friends, 200 of which maybe 300 of which you probably haven't met, and maybe 10 of which you're actually really close with. And with Foursquare, it's like drilling it down a little bit more to be like, these are the people I want to connect with on a more personal level, and it's like an extra little filter. And we were just talking about this before the panel, and I think that even as Foursquare grows, you're going to get little niche people who are getting you to check in on other more specific places. Like I'm checking in at my college, I'm checking in at my class or something like that, and that makes it a little bit more interesting because you have some context around what people are talking about. And I think the idea of checking in is something that is definitely a newer thing, and now Alex probably can talk a little bit more about the history of that with Dodgeball, but I think that's really been fascinating how that's really grown in the past year, not just with Foursquare, but with Gowalla and even with Looped and Brightkite and so many different types of apps that are coming up, and I think it's going to be interesting to see who wins out, but there's definitely something there, and I think that people do want to connect with people more on a social location basis, not just over some personality-less website.
So when Corey said that this was going to be the question, think about immediately a bunch of different things jumped to mind, but one that I think would be most valuable to the audience here is something that we did back in the day with Dodgeball, which was 2003, 2004, when it came to feedback. And
maybe tell us what Dodgeball is.
Are you guys familiar with Dodgeball?
Can you lean forward a little bit? Sorry.
Dodgeball was mobile social software, so it was checking in all based on text messaging. So you would send a text message to us that would say at Sun Microsystems, and then we would check you in. Similar, it was the seedlings of what has now become Foursquare. Similar behavior, similar social dynamics with you would accept friends, they would get pinged and alerted to where you are. But one of the things that we did there that I think would be really useful is when it comes to getting feedback from your users. Now we've got Twitter, we've got Google Alerts, we've got all this stuff that gets pushed to you when people have a problem with something that you're building. Back then, we would go through the logs of every single text message that was sent to the service every morning, and we would see the ones that worked and the ones that didn't work. And the ones that didn't work, we would send those users an email or a text message and say, oh, you were using the service wrong, or we think you meant this venue, or thanks for letting us know. We didn't know that that venue existed. We've added it to the database. You can use it later on. But it showed the importance of feedback in building an early community when we had hundreds of users, before we even had thousands, but then they started to associate actual people behind a service. And so those users really get to know you, and they get to feel that there's a personality behind the brand. And so I guess I would say, yes, you should have your Twitter, you should have your Facebook fan page, but also find the ways that you can go out of your way to pull the feedback out of your users and see where their pain points are, see where you can insert yourself to make that experience better, particularly as a new product in a very crowded space.
I think that's definitely a good point. I think it goes back to me for registration is what is the reason. I think talking about pulling feedback, that's a great reason. I don't want to fill out a whole profile page. Users don't want to fill out a whole profile page to make a comment on a website, so Facebook Connect's a great solution there. Recently, I worked on Billboard.com, and what we did was we built in a couple small applications to help incite you to want to share your information. So we built in this thing, it was soundtrack of your life. You put in the first kiss, the day you graduated from high school or college, and it generates a soundtrack of the #1 song on those days. And that was something that was interesting and kind of goofy, and you would share it on Facebook, and that was our reason for getting people to do it, and it worked. Facebook became the #2 referrer overnight, basically, after the site launched. On the opposite, a team at Razorfish recently launched an iPhone app for Bundle.com. It's a financial analysis site, and it's called Vice Tracker. It's kind of funny. You would connect with your friends and you track, your vices, how many times you have a beer or you have a cigarette or whatever, and all the things that you want to cut out of your life. And it's sort of like social shame. It's an interesting concept, but what we quickly found out, or what the team quickly found out, and had to make some changes, was that you don't really want to get a push message every time your friend has a cigarette. It turns into social spam really quickly. So you really have to be, I guess my point is to really have the purpose in mind of what you want to get out of the social integration before you go ahead and implement it on any wide scale.
That's a really good point. And turning that around, I mean, that's what you want to get out of it. What might be? I'll stick with you for a minute, Brian. I mean, you started to give an example, but I think you could go wider with it. Why do users engage online? What do they get out of it?
I think that's a big question. I mean, I could start with sort of micro fame. I think that's a big driver, especially for certain personality types that are more inclined to broadcast to their friends. So there's certain personality types, I think, that are less about the one-to-one social, although they might be that way in person, but are intrigued at sort of broadcasting, sort of like how Dodgeball sort of created this paradigm of broadcasting it to everyone to see where it sticks, right? It might stick with one person who's like, oh, I'm a block away from there, and then I text back, and then I go and I meet you there. So, and I think using that for business, I think has helped the rise of Twitter and the invention of sort of, not the invention, but I guess the mainstream creation of micro celebrities within that sort of micro blogging context.
Gotcha.
But I think there's lots of different reasons. That's just one.
To Alex, how about taking a website, we've got obviously a lot of people in the audience that have websites that are maybe not inherently social. how can they exploit that sort of that desire for microfame, or can they?
Well, I think one of the big things over the past couple of years is that integration with Facebook. And I mean, it's difficult to create an audience from scratch when you are handed an audience of 300 million people, and the tools to say, if you, like, let's say the phishing social network that was pitched earlier, like, you could easily integrate something that every time you post a photo to that, it'll drop it into your news feed on Facebook, and then all of a sudden all your friends, you're taking advantage of that whole network of people, and those little hooks, and that was not intended, pull people back to your site, and they'll get a little message that's like, oh, Jimmy posted a photo of a great spot to catch bass, and then you see that for the first time and you don't know what it is, and you click on what the app is, and then you're taken to the app. And so it's those little tools that really, like, the marvel of them is that they take the burden off of the user and just give you those connections for free, whereas 10 years ago you had to build all those connections. Every time with Dodgeball, we did not want to build a social network, but we had to build one because there was no Facebook Connect, there was no nothing, and we had to build the whole I'm your friend, you're my friend, and now you just get all that for free, and so you can focus on the idea and less about the infrastructure that it runs on, which is great.
That's good. You're looking at me like you want to say something.
I think that's really true, but I also think that there's a lot about social that people get wrong when it comes to, like, yeah, you can use Facebook Connect, but most people don't want to connect to people they don't know. And, like, and maybe that may be like, I don't know you at all, and you're a stranger, and I don't want to talk to you, and maybe it's, okay, you're a fellow fisherman, and we have something in common. But I think that in general, what works about Twitter and what works about Foursquare is that you choose who you get to be with, who you get to talk to. So I think that, like, if you're like, well, I'm gonna create a site and it's just gonna have Facebook Connect, so everyone's gonna want to be on it and talk to people. Well, that's not really fair, because they don't want to talk to strangers. Even on Facebook, we all get, I'm sure, Facebook friend requests from people we've met once or twice, and we might accept them. But I think Facebook implemented the ability to take people out of your stream because you don't really care necessarily what those people are saying. And it's why you don't necessarily follow them on Twitter unless you feel forced to because they're your really good friend, or because they have something interesting to say. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I think that's really true, and I think that what Facebook allows you to do is at least start with your whole set. So you can sign in through Facebook Connect. It brings your whole set, and you pick the 10 people that actually you want to share your fishing spots with, because you don't actually want to share them with your dad because he takes all the best spots. So you only share them with people in other states.
so they'll never abuse them. Nice. Okay.
But I have to say, in this content, I think this is where there's been this growing dissatisfaction with Facebook. As we've all been evolving as digital social creatures, there's been this confusion. Like, if I go to the New York Times, if you notice, they removed commenting because it was taking their quality of content down. Whereas if you go to Engadget, you can't post an article on there without a million people basically saying, like, oh my God, not another post about Apple and the iPhone. And even if it's on something on Google Droid, somebody will be like, why hasn't anybody mentioned the iPhone yet? Isn't that all the site does? Ha 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 ha. And it kind of takes the quality of the site down. But I think there are areas where we want to express ourselves. With what I work with, the concept of Lady Gaga changed my life. Oh my God, LOL. We have to indulge that. People share that. And if somebody can say this here and we can broadcast it to their Twitter feed and to Facebook, and they can share this bit of information that they wanted to share, it's a good thing, and it helps carry the content out, and it helps possibly draw other people in who share an interest in that content. But I think the other problem that Facebook is having is, as Facebook is trying to encourage all of this stuff, one of the reasons why a lot of people migrated to Facebook from MySpace, where it was all like, OMG, I can change the background color. There's this whole issue of like, no, but I'm also an adult. My family might be here. They might not need the picture of me with a drink out with my friends at 3:30 in the morning last night.
Or worse.
Yeah, and so there is the whole issue of whether or not we can control the privacy of this. And I think it was, the dilemma that Facebook had was that there was a lot of privacy there for a while, but in order to help make themselves more useful in economic terms to help broadcast this information, I think they're doing a disservice to their actual users' social interactivity and connections. And so this, in the context of ultralight startups, you have to ask yourself, if you want to enter the social media realm, what are you trying to be? Are you trying to be someplace where people can share with everybody on a broadcast phase? Or is it this narrow, like, I don't even want to share with all of my Foursquare or Dodgeball friends from back in the day. I might just want to tell 5 close friends where I am tonight, period.
Which is a business idea for anybody listening.
And, it's private.
3 square or 2 square. Well, Christopher Ian, you deal with, you're dealing with huge sites that are very content driven, and subsequently have to deal with managing each of these sites and the commenting and people wanting to be really involved. Is that something that you think most websites can benefit from, or is there a way that most websites can benefit from lots of user interaction?
I would say in the case of Scale I've been dealing with for just the past several months is I think there it's very important because it keeps you have many networks that produce content. If you release it once, people might watch it, they might watch the ad space on it. If people come and they can watch it online, they might watch another little part of it, that's great, and that takes you to all of Hulu, Juiced, all of these different variations. The reason that, whether you're running a piece of video or an article or a photograph, as soon as you enter this level where people can comment on it, okay, I might see what other people have said, I might come and add another piece to it, but it's still a semi-passive thing, but I can at least see that I'm possibly part of a community or not. Again, there's the whole issue that a lot of the legitimate hard news sites have started removing commenting, because when the first 10 hits are somebody saying first, and then followed by cheap Viagra, it's bad advertising. And so in order to stay on top of this, you have to decide whether you want to have practically full-time moderators or flagging. So now you have a cost expenditure. Like, sure, you can use Disqus, or you could use WordPress tools, or you can use an off-the-shelf bulletin board and encourage the growth of a community, but who's going to thin it out so you aren't exposed to reputational risk? And I think that's something that you really have to think about. And I've been involved with other sites where they've actually wanted to engage commenting, and I've had to say no.
Okay, so
yes, Graham, we have a question.
How do you solve that problem then, other than just saying it exists?
It's completely context. You have to decide whether it's worth, in investment banking terms, it's reputational risk. You have to decide whether you want to invest the time and energy into controlling and moderating the content. Sometimes you might have a pack of 5 million unruly tweens who want to be social, but they can't show their picture because of anti-predatory laws. And so there are ways that, how do you allow engagement of this? But you also have to create tools where people can flag each other. But again, you have to worry about these other bad behaviors that people just might start flagging everybody that they don't like or disagree with, versus people who actually need to be flagged possibly for moderation. So, you now have an internal flag whenever anybody flags more than 3 other users to make sure that wasn't a vendetta. So you end up writing really elaborate and complex business rules just to handle, something that you can go to DreamHost and install a bulletin board for free. But again, it's how are you going to control this information? And so you have to think about your business.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, I can't remember who, I was racking my brain, I can't remember who said it, but somebody recently just said, be very careful of your first 10,000 users. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to open the gates to Facebook, and the classic example is Digg, right? Mm-hmm. Digg, hugely successful. They're going to want to be about travel, they're going to want to be about fashion, but they're still going to be about sort of geeky links on the web, because that's who their core users were at the beginning, and that's who defined the other users who got interested in that site. So your first 10,000 users don't just help you get started socially, they actually start to define the personality of your site through the types of comments that they leave and the type of things, if you have some sort of rating service, the things that they rate up and rate down. So it's another way to think about it. It's like your first 10,000 users define your site.
The other thing about comments I think that's important is, and you started touching on this, was the idea that it's your brand equity, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just okay, well, first or whatever, lols. It's the people when they get to your site often are very downright hostile to commenters and don't want to see them and don't want anything to do with them. And a lot of times people, when they reach them, they're like, why did they do this? This just ruined my whole experience. And I think that's a really, really important thing, because there are sites. One of our clients is Newsweek, and we're trying to. If you go to their site, it is one of the worst sites on the internet, and it's not just the content, it's the design, and their commenters actually are pretty intelligent. They actually have some people who are having really interesting political discourse, but it's that one person who does that oh, I just want to be the first commenter, that ruins that conversation, or someone who posts, some completely ignorant rant. But even that, at least he's called out by people. The other opposite side of that is look at Gawker. Gawker is all about commenters. I mean, that whole community is based on commenters, and they said, you know what, let them in. And not only are we going to let you say whatever you want, we're going to make the people who do the best comments, who post the most comments, we're going to make you part of our team. We're going to make you, have some control over what other people are saying. And that's, I think, a very interesting brand model, and kind of turns it on its side, as opposed to most organizations. But they made that choice. I mean, Nick Denton is known to kind of go against the grain. He said, I'm going to do something that no one else is doing, and that worked for him. I don't know if it would work for Engadget's a little different, and they actually kind of have a lot of haters on their side.
Right.
They actually turned off their commenting recently for a couple days, yeah, because it just got too crazy with the iPad.
I think one of the interesting examples that's been around forever now is Metafilter, that's managed to create a community based on respect, and just the comments are always top notch, and there's no, I guess, trolls or whatnot. And I think the way that they did that is from day one, the focus was on community, and I believe you could only become part of that if you were invited by someone else who was already part of that. And that's one way to do it, where it's like basically everyone in the community is vouched for by someone else, so you're not going to bring your idiot friend who's just going to post first every time.
It's like the smarter version of the Gmail invite.
Yeah.
So invite only, basically. Nice. Do we have any questions? We'll start with...
I had a question today from a client, actually, and we talked about Facebook Connect. And we talked about giving all this power to Facebook, and even though it's free, and that's great, what's the downside of Facebook Connect and Open Social, and using those tools to, allow people to pass that data back and forth? When we become too dependent on those in our sites, what have you guys been thinking about? Has that been a conversation? Like, wow, everyone's rushing, like, stampeding herd to these tools, and that's great, but what?
Well, you have to know their terms of use, which change every 3 months.
If not more frequently.
So
it's a pain point.
Yeah, I mean, the last build that I did with Facebook Connect, we had to stop 2 times in development to reassess, because they changed their API once and they changed their terms once. So both times we had to stop and reassess what we were doing to make sure it was still legit. So you have to build risk, if you're building something using the Facebook Connect API from the beginning. The second thing is you don't really own that data, right? So if you use Facebook Connect, you've connected someone and they can post your content back to Facebook, but you don't own that user's data. You have to through Facebook Connect pull their data and say, do you also give me permission, user, to have you in my database as well? So it's like an extra step that kind of isn't as smooth as Facebook Connect would be, but that's the only way for you to actually get the data.
Here we're talking about Facebook. Well, how about choosing OpenID instead of Facebook Connect?
I mean, you can. The downside of OpenID is it's the network effect, right? It's all the gravity is in Facebook.
And regular users don't understand OpenID. Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem, is that you'll see a login and people don't even know what to put in there, and that right there you've lost them, because they'll just see the big blue button and click Facebook.
Okay. We have a question in the back.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are any sites that you particularly like the design of, and you think the design itself actually helps people either A, want to register, or be part of the community.
I think I would say that most of the time design is not the problem. I think that good design is also good user experience, and they go hand in hand. Oftentimes, I think I've seen beautifully designed sites that would look great as a poster and would never work as an interactive experience. So I think when talking about design, it's really important to understand that design isn't just a visual, or isn't just an artistic experience. It's really a well organized piece of well organized tool, let's say.
Well, what about less about colors and fonts and that kind of thing, but about UI, UI elements and UI patterns that you see?
2 that come to mind immediately are Posterous, where you go and the first action that you do is you are blogging. And there's no what's my name, what's my username, all that. There are 3 steps, and I think they actually cross out the first 2 because you don't have to do them, and you just do the third one, and then you have a blog. And I think enjoys things, it has another really, really solid sign-up process where the first thing you do is all you do is type in a username and then you're using the site. And so it's like you can't get better than one call to action. Like that's so if you can get down to that, you're in good shape. I think Tumblr's is pretty good too.
Tumblr's great. Tumblr's great.
Drop.io if you need it's a file hosting, so you just go in, you put in the name that you want, and you're immediately in a space, and you've uploaded a file, and you can share that link with anybody.
The Kayak iPhone app.
Drop.io.
Use the Kayak iPhone app. It's really good. I think the Kayak site's gotten a little busy, but their iPhone app and the way you can filter your travel search is pretty well organized.
Okay, next question, Sergey.
Many of the examples you are giving are about free content and maybe advertising-driven business models. Is it possible to have social interaction and social website and paid products or around more traditional business models, or I don't know?
Would anybody ever
more
pay for
valuable
Facebook? Is that what you're asking?
I'm sorry?
Would anybody ever pay for Facebook? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically, or I don't know, those loan owners, can you really sell and be social? Something like that.
They're thinking very hard.
Well, I know, and I know some of the closed communities haven't done as well. Even things like A Small World definitely are in this sort of weird area where they try and be exclusive, but there's nothing about them that feels exclusive, so it's awkward again. And there's just the whole issue that it's really hard to charge money for something that's free. You really have to provide a compelling reason. Apple and iTunes gets away with it because you're like, oh, screw it, $1, send me the song, or fine, $10, send me the album. I'm too lazy to download like the latest like torrent software or what have you.
What about Guilt Group? I mean, in some ways, Guilt Group is very social in that it's all about inviting people, right? It's like the Gmail model where you can't be a member unless you invite people. And the social aspect of that is not about talking to people, it's not about commenting, but it's about actually making money off your friends, basically. Everyone know what Guilt Group is? No. Okay, so Guilt Group is a high-end sample sales site, so they'll have like pretty much the highest-end designers at prices that most people can afford. And basically, you can't get into Guilt Group unless you're invited by someone who's already a member. And let's say I invite Alex, and Alex buys something. I automatically get like $25 or something like that.
And so do I.
And then you do too, yeah. So everyone's making money and getting discounts on the things that they're buying, and they're already super high end. So it's not social in the traditional sense of we're all talking to each other, but it's social in that you're inviting people to be a part of it. Now the other social part of it is that it's also a competition because these are sample sales. There's only so much product available. So if something costs, there are a pair of Prada shoes on sale for $99, and there are 10 pairs available. Well, people are rushing to get there, and they're competing against each other, often against people they don't know, but often against their friends too. And that kind of creates a bit of fun to it as well. I think that's somewhat of a paid model, but it's only paying when you're buying a product.
Question?
I wonder, would you guys like to put a stake in the heart of online privacy, or is it conversely that if you aren't completely open, you're socially dead?
The question is about privacy and whether things should just be completely open.
I don't know. I think it's tending towards the fact that they are, like whether we like it or not, and that I mean, me personally, I feel like the sooner that you get comfortable with that, the better, because I think that's just where things are trending, and you look at it, and I was writing this down before, like when you think of the things in social software that have caused outrage over the last 10 years, and I remember when Friendster turned on the ability to say, show me who's looked at my profile, people went apeshit about it. And then you get Facebook Beacon, which people went crazy over, and then a year later, everyone is doing a newsfeed, and everyone, I just think we just get more and more comfortable with it, and the conversations are quieting down, and I think eventually people will just accept the fact that you share stuff.
And there's stuff that's never going away anyway. It's like if you're on Twitter, you delete a Twitter post, that's still there somewhere. It's still available for someone to look at. I think it's important though to be able to set some privacy settings. Like Facebook is a great example. I don't want everyone to see my stuff, and I think it's okay for them not to see it. But I think that's when you really have to be willing to control it. And unfortunately, most people aren't into customizing. And so actually getting someone to do that is challenging.
Well, and the big thing also, I think, is it's a thanks, Dan. It's a generational thing where if you think of the Like there are people our age, and then you think of the people that are 10, 15 years who've never known anything else but this. Like we still remember when you'd have a computer and not have it plugged into anything except for power. And they've never not known sharing every aspect of their life. So 10 years from now, like that's all they know.
Okay, question?
Just to comment on that further, Alex, do you remember Third Voice? So Third Voice was the ability to write graffiti on a website if somebody
like co-browsing or
like co-browsing. So in '98, this was the biggest deal, and web masters were loading up an applet to stop Third Voice running. And now Google launched Google SideWiki, and nobody cared about it.
But yes,
something got sued out of existence.
Yeah, Third Voice was high reputational risk for especially the pharmaceutical industry took them down very quickly.
Well, so in that same sort of vein, have any of you implemented something like Get Satisfaction or User Voice, which is a third-party plugin? You know, effectively you can plug in a support forum where your users can make suggestions, that kind of thing. And what do you think of that?
We're using a Foursquare website to Get Satisfaction, and I mean, like you were talking about earlier, Alex, it's all about user feedback, and their goal is to make themselves better because of their users. So that's been really successful for them. But I don't think there's one I prefer of another. They all pretty much do the same thing.
I think Get Satisfaction can be a little overwhelming for people at first, especially if they're not super savvy. Two things that have come up recently are Dropbox rolled their own, let's say, public product roadmap where they let their users vote on things that they're working on. So they'll say, here are the 10 things that we've thought about building, and as a user of the service, you get 6 votes, and you can put those votes in different buckets. And then those buckets are publicly revealed, like everyone is voting for us to do this, so this is what we're going to build next. I think that's an interesting example. And there was another one recently with the folks at 37 Signals who gave their team 3 weeks to build a customer service app as simple as it could be. And what came out of it was really, really nice. So I've checked those out.
I think there's a downside to those apps from a product standpoint. Again, not to say that you shouldn't listen to your users, because you definitely should, but if you're only listening to your users, then you're only satisfying the users you have, as opposed to like thinking about, you know, a roadmap that's going to get you new users and like maybe extend your services outside of where they are. Because in general, users are commenting on what is there. They in general don't have, as a product designer, you're the one that's supposed to have the vision as to where it should be.
And also, you have to, the context, you have to take some of that feedback with a grain of salt. Happy people aren't very likely to say what made them happy. People who are frustrated or angry will say something very fast.
So Graham had actually asked this question. I'm reading your mind. No, it asked, and so I'm curious from your perspective as UI designers, you know, is it generally better to take the Apple approach of I'm going to tell you what's best for you, you know, learn it, or the sort of Google approach of test and optimize and tweak and forever in beta?
Well, Google's bigger.
But I mean, do you guys take your expertise and apply it and say, no, trust me, this is what you want?
I mean, I think it's all about somewhat being simple and trying to define what the product is. Oftentimes you have clients come to you, have grand visions of what they want to do, and they have tons of functionality they want to put into it, whether it be social or not. And it's all about narrowing it down to what the right choices are and doing one or two things right, and then getting users used to that system and kind of helping them grow with you, so that as you add more features on, they take that system and they learn along with it. You know, I think then what Google does, even with Gmail or other things they've launched, they definitely add features over time, and Apple does the same thing. They just take two different approaches to how they do that.
Sure. Well, I think the difference between like the Google and the Apple is sort of like a level of polish and experience on it. But I think there's a lot of testing. But in terms of that, I would say like part of it is having a selective filter on your feedback. Like make sure you ask your actual customers what they want. Don't ask everybody in the world, or you're going to get a lot of conflicting signal there. But on the other hand, in terms of scale and scope creep, this is where I do wonder about like the evolution of social networking. If we look at like, you know, all the way back to Usenet and, you know, keep progressing through like LiveJournal to Friendster, through all of these different evolutions, I think like the whole issue on privacy is something that's being felt out by trial and error. On the one hand, we find we're making more and more information public, but almost everybody on Facebook screams that they want a dislike button too. You know, and so there's this issue of like I think privacy is like a under exploration area where I think in a way it's almost going to be like a luxury commodity of like who I'm going to actually trust with information to not let it go public, you know, but possibly just share with my friends.
Okay, Tony, you had a question.
This question is directed at Christopher, given the focus on youth and online gaming and all these kind of things. So we're talking a lot about the free model and Facebook and all these kinds of things, but now you're starting to see freemium like SoundCloud and JamBlue and Mixmatch Music and all the Facebook gaming, Mafia Wars, Farmville. There's real dollars here. What, in terms, in your mind, are you doing now, and MTV doing to kind of capitalize on that music that's selling little pieces of things to users who once thought everything was free, but now they're buying stuff?
I actually really can't speak to that. That's actually not in my realm. I'm just really in the social realm. Okay. But on the other hand, I do have to say that like the whole, you know, as an aside, I am fascinated by this whole like Zynga phenomenon, which I really think is the secret that they found is to actually capitalize on people's competitiveness. You know, you release a free game, but like basically it's like, oh, you can pay $20 to cheat, you can pay $100 to cheat a lot. You know, it implies to.
It's a metaphor for life, really. So also, I wanted to talk about, there are a lot of, you know, for those of us bootstrapping, there are a lot of free and cheap tools online, you know, WordPress for a CMS or blogging, Ning for social, plug-in social network, that kind of stuff. Realizing that most of you work for fairly big companies, but you know, do you think that these tools are sufficient to accomplish, you know, what somebody who is bootstrapping might want to accomplish, you know, given that they're free or cheap, but you know, can plug in and get started?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to get from being completely bootstrapped to being relevant and like making things happen, like it's never been easier with the tools that we have to communicate and to, again, like not worry about like the nuts and bolts, like worry about building your app, worry about making sure that it works, worry about that stuff, and then these tools are like they can take care of the rest.
What's the most successful Ning site that you're aware of?
I think 50 Cent has a social network on Ning, and it's got 500,000 users.
And isn't everything vocoded? No. I'm just kidding.
That would be
auto-tuned. Thank you.
No, I mean that came across that very recently, and I think added on top of that is sort of the flexible cloud kind of hosting services on top of the fact that there's a lot of these free publishing software. I think it will get you. I think, you know, what's interesting is that I think it helps you get from 0 to, let's say, 60, but to go from 60 to 100 in the social realm is actually an order of magnitude bigger, right? Because like if you get good and you get successful and you get 100,000 users, great. But if you've gotten 100,000 users in 2 years, in 6 months you'll have 1 million. Like the network effect is exponential. So these tools also are the ones that will break at a certain point, and that's why, you know, the enterprise solutions are always knocking at your door by the time you're. That's a good problem to have. Anyway.
Well, and in addition to the technology, how do you have any advice for actually managing, you know, your own social? You create a website, you're getting lots of comments. You know, do you have any advice for actually moderating that? As a moderator, I'm interested.
I think it's important to make a choice whether or not you're going to be moderated, because if you're not, in the sites that we've done, either comments are open or they're not with a certain amount of filtering. Like even with WordPress, which has an okay commenting system, there's some sort of, you know, filter that you can apply. But if you're going to moderate, I think you need to be very upfront with that. Most users get angry when they find out that their comment is going to be ignored or deleted for whatever reason that they may not know why it's being deleted. I mean, we tend to recommend, if you're going to do it, just let it go and make some rules, but in general, let it go. And so far, with our clients, it's worked. I mean, you guys may have other experiences, but we tend to find that works really well for us.
I would say one of the ways to actually cheat, and well, it's not a cheat, it is a way to be upfront and keep it focused, is a lot of times where people have released stuff and you announce that it's moderated, you start the topics, and you basically say anything off topic will be removed.
So kind of basically like a blog model of,
Yeah,
of
and
here's the topic.
if you start it with that, with the discussions and commenting, and you put that rule there, because one of the things that often happens is, one of the things I've seen happen often is like as soon as politics or religion enters into it, if you're selling ad spots, it's awesome because it goes exponentially until you end up with a reputational risk problem. But otherwise, there are topics that'll explode. So I said, like, you have to be very careful about steering it. But it's the whole thing that if somebody very vocal gets blocked from a community or banned, like, they can come back with a ton of hate. And also be aware, if you're in the social media realm, the little thing known as the 4chan effect. AT&T went to war with 30 million angry tweens who fancy themselves to be hackers, and they had a mess to clean up after that, from a stupid bulletin board site.
Gotcha.
I would never call them stupid.
We've got time for a couple more questions. Yes, sir?
Any thoughts on Squarespace versus WordPress?
One you have to pay for. So I would go with not that one.
Yep.
So if you have a page that has a profile with all your identity in it, how much of that profile is too much to be on every part of the website? So if you have one page with your name and all the information about what you've done on that site, how much of that presence would be too much if you were just on like a blog and then you had your avatar, and how much data would be in the page?
It really depends on what your site does or what you want your users to do. But chances are, like, all that stuff. So unless, like, I don't need to see my phone number on every single page. Like, I know my phone number, I know my
Does
email.
everybody else on that page, if it's a social experience, if there's more than one person on that page, how much is too much data?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, did I opt in? Because if I didn't opt in, it's just my username and not my picture.
If someone's interested, they'll probably click through to you, and really you should be able to control what you want shown. Like when you're registering, you should be able to say this is private or this is not private.
It really depends on if you've opted in. Like, is this a network of people that I know, that I say I've known, or is this just strangers? And then also, what experience do you want? Is your site about meeting new people, or is it about, exchanging ideas with people you already know?
From a design standpoint, I'd add you want to limit it just to keep it clean. I mean, if someone really wants to find out that information and it's available to them, give them an easy way to do that. But I could see that becoming very busy very quickly.
Yeah.
I was wondering, along those lines, do you find it that users are afraid that using Facebook Connect, they think that automatically all their information is given, and do you have any friction there or try to mitigate that problem to still allow them to sign up?
I haven't had that problem.
Yeah, I think there's enough terms of usage and all of these other very lengthy legal statements that nobody ever bothers to want to read. But I think the good news is I think there is a certain level of trust about how much information is shared. And I don't think anybody really wants to violate it because that could cost them part of their business.
I mean, yeah, we care a lot about privacy, but does your average user, maybe, or your average teenager, maybe not? But,
Facebook
John?
does as well. They have a lot to lose.
What are the best off-the-shelf social networks that are available currently? Because I know, with the exception of those, like there's also Collective X, I've heard of Slingset, but to add to an existing website.
That's free?
That's free or free-ish.
But I'm not sure, but again, it all goes to the context issue of, it really has to do with why you want to build your own social network versus merge or share in a social media space. Like, I think if you have something very unique and distinct, you're probably going to have to end up building it.
I think also that people tend to not want to join another social network, and we were talking about that earlier. I think one of the reasons why Facebook Connect and Twitter just work so well is that people have to put so little effort in. They can just use their username and password. They don't have to remember anything else, and it makes their lives that much easier. And I think we care about our users because they're the ones who make our businesses successful. And so I would just give them the solution that they already want, which is that.
Yeah, and really, how many times do you want to have to enter your favorite bands, your favorite books, your favorite color?
I think that people are starting to, I think Hot Potato, you can only sign up with a Facebook account, which is...
Well, and I know for Europe there's also a concern. There is a growing social network over there, Hive. And so internationally, you do have to account for this. So one of the questions earlier about Facebook is, although it is the biggest game in town, it might not always be. But the one thing that's been good is the fact that, because we do have Facebook and OpenID, any probable future social networks will probably have similar open sharing rules in place. Hive.
But to answer your question, I think as far as free ones go, Ning is always the one that comes out.
That's what's, yeah.
Second.
I think you mentioned partially about OpenID, but what about the difference? Because Facebook is not only giving you no password, single password, right? It gives you the social graph. OpenID does not provide that. What do you think is more important, ease of participation or that social graph that you bring with you?
From a user standpoint or a business standpoint?
From business standpoint,
a business standpoint, I go with
which
both
approach
Facebook.
do you want to take? The one that makes it easier to bring your social graph with you, or the one that makes you easier to start participating?
I think, doesn't Facebook Connect let you do both?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or, but I think it also depends on what you're bringing them over to do. And if you're bringing them over to share and converse, then I think the social graph, I don't think it's an either or is the answer, but I think if what you're building is fundamentally social, then you want the social graph, and they'll get over the ease of use problem.
Okay, I think we got one more question.
How's you guys mentioned making it easier just to get going and take information. From your experience with your clients, being mindful of COPA, Children's Online Protection and Privacy Act, how have they navigated that? With COPA, you're not allowed to have private information of a child under 13 years old. Yet, we clearly want them to get going right away without entering either parent membership or what have you. So I'm just curious, with your clients, has the FTC come down on them with regards to this, or can you speak to this kind of navigating? We're saying it's just going to get used to it. Some executive said, forget about privacy. There's no one has any privacy, but clearly the FTC cares about this, and I'm just curious how your clients are dealing with that requirement. Obviously Facebook is very sensitive to that.
Well, Facebook you can't even join under 13.
Well,
which is why Facebook.
44% of teens are on Facebook.
Right.
As you know, so I'm just curious.
So how do your clients deal with privacy?
How are they navigating these requirements with COPA?
I think it's something that although Facebook makes it easier, it's something that they've had to deal with anyway. Anytime they've taken any sort of sign up, or if they're doing any sort of, holding of private information, and inevitably it's plausible. I forget the word, plausible denial. I agree that I'm over 14 and I check the box. And that's all they can do is say they check the box. If they lied, then they've circumvented the system that I put in place to prevent it.
It's a little more tricky than that. Yeah, definitely plausible.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll do one more quick question.
Question, not a ramble. Do you think there's an opportunity for a new or an additional social network that is more authentic, where the relationships between the individuals in the network actually represent, or the edges are represented by strength of relationship, as opposed to just, as on Facebook we all know, there's no differentiation between the person who we met once years ago and
Facebook isn't hollowed ground. It still does have the risk that somebody could come up with a better game, and it could take 2 years to slowly build up, and it could be a shocking shift.
Right. I think just to answer your question, I think Facebook's also aware of this and has started to build in their list functionality. I think is to address these very issues where I can create a professional list and a high school list and a people who live in my neighborhood list and only send things. It gets a little overwhelming to have to set those preferences, but they're aware of that problem, and I think they've passed that tipping point where now they've got their tentacles in so many other things that it's harder. The roots are deeper than MySpace's roots were. That it would be harder for someone to flip it on them, but it's certainly possible.
I think it's always possible. It never seems likely until it happens, and then everyone was like, how do we not see that? I mean, they do. I think the important thing is if you're going to come out with anything and you want to compete with Facebook, the value has to be immediately evident, right? So, I mean, even if it's really hard because of the gravity, like if I join it, I'm the only one there, then it's not worth anything. And then when one person joins, all of a sudden now it's worth twice as much as nothing. Still nothing.
And does anybody remember Tribe.net?
But anyway, that I think what Facebook did is they took the confusion that MySpace was trying to figure out. Instead of staying with music, MySpace tried to figure out too much, and Facebook said, this is too much to also have a configurable blog page. So we're going to own the interface, and we're going to make it super simple for you to do as much communicating as possible. And then they won. So if whoever's going to take over for Facebook has to be like, well, this is what Facebook is doing, we're going to do this, and it's going to be super simple, and as soon as you join, you're going to know the value. And then it'll happen quickly.
I think you almost have to have it be someone who's got an established network of communication. Like Google could turn Gmail into a social network like that, and they would be a player that could make this happen. I think starting from zero and doing it will be very difficult.
It'd be hard. All right, well, so we'll leave you with the challenge to go on and topple Facebook. I'd like to say thank you to all of our panelists.